Welcome back, everybody. I'm Glenn McGowan. Today I'm going to be continuing doing the coilover swap on my C4. If you're just tuning in, last week I installed DS304 coilovers on the front, and I realized that I wanted to go just a little bit lower. So I had ordered those, I installed them. So I just have to button up a few things in the front. I'm going to show you what this looks like on those coilovers. I have to hook up the sway bar and stuff like that in the front too. So we're going to go over that stuff. Then we're going to move into the rear of the car, which I have to address a couple little things. One is I have to swap out bushings and kind of refinish these strut bars here. So we're going to get those out and replace them with some polyurethane ones. Also, I have to put back my tie rod locators, or whatever you want to call them, back in the car. I had like a whole custom Heim joint set up with the air ride, so I had to put these back. So I'm going to work on those few things. Once I get all that buttoned up, I can move into making the coilover mounts for the rear. But right now the suspension in the back is just all loosey-goosey, so I need to get this all put in place before I can get my ride height set up with everything I want to do with the coilovers in the rear. So first things first, I want to go over and show you the front of this, how this looks like with the DS302 coilovers on it, and then at that point we can button this thing up from the front and move on to the rear. This week's video is brought to you by EtwisBone.com. Shop our site for Corvette performance parts, merchandise, and much more. See the link in the description or visit EtwisBone.com. Okay, so I don't have this thing obviously level on the ground or anything, but I do have the front wheels with the weight of the engine in the car on these blocks of wood here, like that. So I do have a 5mm spacer pushing it out. I still have to kind of play around with that a little bit, but for right now, I was just trying to get an idea. I have these set on the lowest recommended ride height setting, which is like 9.5 inches with our mounts. And it's pretty much as low as you can go, but I have room to go up about 1/2 inch or so if I need to for clearance. But this is actually a little bit higher, it looks like, than what I had originally, if my memory serves me correct. But that can't be trusted these days. But anyway, so let's take a quick look at this. It's kind of hard to tell with it being on blocks, but it is sitting pretty low. But the way I had my air ride and everything's kind of removed underneath there, I have plenty of clearance to actually bring the wheel out if I needed to. But as of right now, it looks like it's going to be, perfectly fine the way I have it dialed in. So I think I'm going to be happy with that, and it should give me plenty of ground clearance, so I don't have to worry too much. You know what I mean? It's still super low, but this is what this looks like. So it's technically kind of tucked up in there a little bit, but it's kind of hard to tell with the vehicle up. But that gives you, a no gap in the wheel well look there with the 302. And if you're not concerned about going low, if you ran like that 304 on there, that would have been perfectly fine. It lowers the car enough to get the center of gravity down, but also, you don't have to worry about ground clearance or anything like that. So just one little thing I'm going to go over real quick, since I installed the coilovers without filming it, because why do you want to see that twice? The one difference with the 302 compared to this 304 here, the length of it's different, obviously. So what you have to do when you're installing the spring and everything, you have to unbolt this top piece here, and this, just hold that down and unscrew that piece. Then when you're putting the spring on and everything, you have to screw that down and tighten it, because there's not enough room, because it's so small, to get the spring on and then slide this underneath. With this bigger one you can, because there's enough travel to like run it all the way down, put this underneath, run it up, put it in the car, set your ride height, all that kind of stuff. The 302 is so small that you have to take this off, put everything on top, and then screw this back down. So that's pretty much the only difference. All the other ones you can assemble, put it in, and then set it up in the car. The 302 is the one that you actually have to just take this top piece off and then tighten it back down once it's assembled. So that's the one little tip. I also wanted to show you just a little thing too you may or may not run into with our sway bar links here. So with this being this close to the spring here, sometimes you have to actually turn and clock the spring, so there's a gap in between the sway bar and the spring here like that. Once it, I mean, it can be practically almost touching because everything's going up together, but getting it installed, and unless you move it forward, you'll have a ton of room. But if you're keeping it at the factory height and use the factory bushings and stuff like that, you just may have to turn your spring just so it's not touching, you know, the actual sway bar, and then you'll be able to just hook it up easily there. So usually you have to jack the car up, then turn the spring, get it where it needs to be, and then sit it back down. So I'm just bolting up my sway bar end link here, and I just want to kind of give you an idea what I was talking about. Now that I have like the wheels off of it and the car's jacked back up again, the suspension's kind of hanging. So you can see right here in this point, the sway bar is hitting this. So what I'm doing is I'm just turning the spring and slowly lowering this down here like this, just until there's enough space in between here. Zoom in real quick like that. So there's enough space where it's not even touching this because I'm turning the coil spring, and then it's right where it needs to be at the bottom link here down there like that. Even though it's close, it won't hit because it's all going up together. And then just double check it once you get the weight of the car back on it. So if you do notice that these sway bar links look different than the ones that we sell, these were actually like the prototype ones that I came up with for the original design. So they're kind of like a mismatched group of parts to, you know, make it work, but should probably put like the good ones on here. But I just want to zoom in real quick and show you what I was talking about there. So as you can see, it's like right in between the coils there. So it is close, but it's not going to touch it at all. Also too, like a couple things I did end up changing. I cut down this bolt here for this bracket. It's just so freaking long that I'm like, it's got to come down. It just looks so weird. I couldn't stop staring at it. And I also put grade 8 washers down here because the first time I had them on, they were all crushed and stuff from tightening them. So I put grade 8 washers there. You probably don't have to, but for me, I just feel a little bit better just having it look nicer and be a little bit stronger. Other than that, that's what that looks like. And all I got to do is just do the other side. So I'm going to first cut the outside lip of these rubber bushings off. Luckily these are all old and brittle, so the rubber's just kind of falling off, because I'm going to just press this metal insert out from this end to the other. Alright, so I'm going to put this in the ball joint press. Now I don't have any like adapters on this at all. I'm just going to push this through this opening. Luckily the diameter of this is smaller than that. And then this is actually a perfect size to fit right on the lip of that. So it works out good. And they come out pretty easy. So now the rubber's in there like that. You can just put a flathead in here. Boop, pops out just like that. That all needs to be cleaned up because it's like super corroded in there. So like some 80 grit sandpaper or something, scrape most of that stuff out, and then that'll be ready. So I'm gonna pop out these other ones. So I tried using a cup on this originally and push out the whole bushing together, but I was running into the cup kind of sliding because there's not that much of a shelf here, and the cups that I had weren't like small enough to fit in there. So that's why I ended up just deciding to push this little metal piece out, and then I realized that rubber bushing comes right out. So I think that's probably the easiest approach, just to get that out. It's a lot quicker anyway. All right, so now I'm just gonna sand these things. I am gonna paint them because they're pretty rough. And yeah, might as well make them look pretty, so. Nice and freshly painted. I got all my bushings laid out, so I'm gonna lube everything up and then put them in on the vise. So now I'm just gonna push these in here. I mean, I don't even know if I really need a vise, like just push that in with my hand, but have a vise and they're hard to get in, use that. If not, just push them in by hand. I think I'll probably have to, let's see, have to push this in with a vise. So, super easy. If you didn't have a vise, hammer, something like that. You can probably just push really hard, it would go in. One down, 3 more to go. Also easy. Oh yeah, you can just push those things right in. The control arm ones in the front, they definitely needed the vise. They were kind of tough, but these are easy. Okay, time to put them in. I don't want to overexert myself, pushing too hard. Okay, let's put them on the car. So that side went in easy, the one that's closest to the diff. This one I had to kind of whack in with a rubber mallet. Now I'm just using a screwdriver. I'm going to use an extension here just to kind of get this lined up correctly. And then I'll put my bolt in. And put some Loctite on that nut too. That. And then I'm going to do my alignment side. What I did was I marked this before I took the old air ride stuff off, and I took a picture of it marked on the car left and right, so I would know when I put this back together I could kind of just dial it in, just so I don't have to get it aligned right away, because I just had it aligned once I got done the air ride, so this will get me pretty close. So I just finished the driver's side one and I got my alignment mark spot on. One thing I forgot to mention when I was doing the bushings was that there is a difference with the inside inserts here. The inside one, it has a smaller bolt, so it has a thicker wall. And then the outside one has a thinner wall for the thicker bolt that is right there. Sometimes I think it's like the worst feeling when you're putting in these new painted parts and then you look around, for example, the yellow knuckle, the red paint on my half shaft that I did clean up at one point years ago, that this makes everything else just not look good. But at the same time, I don't really want to pull everything out and redo it, so. Also too, if you actually push up on the suspension, like I had a jack stand underneath the other side, but if you just push up on it while you're using a rubber mallet to smack it in, it's just almost down too far, so it kind of binds a little bit. But if you push up on it enough, you'll be able to kind of smack it in there. With it hanging down too low like this, sometimes it might be too hard and then you're hitting it too hard and you don't need that. So just push up on this or put a jack stand or something underneath of it, and it'd be good to go. All right, all done. Getting so close. So I'm getting ready to put the toe links in here, so I have the tie rods for that. So typically they go in like this, right? They sit on top of the knuckle. So when you go a lot lower, this part actually hits the frame. So if you're just going down like an inch or two, you don't have to touch it. But if you are gonna go a lot lower, or if you do like air ride, like my old setup, I had to make this whole drop bracket and a heim joint just to get the clearance to go as low as I wanted to. Even when I had my coilovers on it originally, I had these turned upside down. Now, when you're doing that, you have to do one thing because ball joints are tapered here. So you actually have to ream out the bottom part of the knuckle. And I bought a ball joint reamer a while back and I reamed it out because it needs to be tapered so it sits in there correctly. So if you do that, you have to get a reamer to ream out the bottom of that so that tie rod sits in there correctly. So I'm gonna run these in. Another thing I did too, when I was taking all the air ride stuff out, I took a measurement of the toe link from the center line of the knuckle to a part on the toe link so I could get these kind of dialed in and get my toe pretty much where it was originally, just so I don't have to run it over and get it aligned right away. I can do that down the road if I had to. So I'm just gonna go hang these on the car real quick. I'm still gonna close like this and then I'll take a measurement real quick, see where I'm at. Come in a little bit. I'll get it close and then I'll just spin these bars up to dial it in and then lock them down once I get both of them set up and get them kind of at ride height. Last but not least, the passenger side one. Don't forget your cotter pin. So I got this all in. I'm just gonna kind of play around underneath here and just try to dial this in so they're even on both sides. So I'm just making a toe adjustment underneath here. I took measurements and they both have to come in. So I'm going to just use a set of channel locks here and just rotate this. I believe I gotta go down we're up on, yeah, down on this one to bring it in. Just gonna a little bit at a time, and then I'll measure them. And this one too, this one just has to come down a little bit. So I just finished dialing in the toe in the back here, got everything locked down, everything's tightened. So everything's pretty much back together now in the rear as far as the suspension is concerned. Now, the next thing I have to move into is making the coilover mount, which will be a separate video because I am waiting for a couple things and I gotta pretty much make those from scratch. But I am playing around with the ride height right now. I just wanna show you kind of where I'm at and what I'm gonna go with here. And then at that point, I gotta just take the wheel off, take some measurements, make sure the shock is at the proper install height, and then at that point I can, you know, fine tune how I'm gonna actually make those lower mounts work. But let's just take a quick look. So as you can see, there is just a little bit of a wheel well gap. Before, my tire was like up, you know, at least 1.5 inches up in there. I remember like just the tire letter was kind of tucked up in there, which isn't really practical because the half shafts are just too much at a violent angle and it vibrates. But this should be good, and I can actually space the wheels out too if I needed to or wanted to. I also wanted to show you real quick, I do kind of have this mocked up in here. Now this is at 11-inch ride height here. So it'll come over like this, basically. So I'll make the mount off of this knuckle onto that. But that's basically the starting point for making the coilover mount. Okay, so that is a wrap. So now I have the front suspension all done. I have the rear all put back together to factory basically. And the only thing I have to do next is those lower coilover mounts. So next week we'll be doing some fabrication. So if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. Thanks for watching.